if they take on really bad owners, these are the ones that are basically slumlords. They're pushing back on everything. They want to do everything as cheap as possible. So then the property manager becomes kind of a crap shield for a slumlord, which is a really uncomfortable place to be as a company or as a business owner, because now your reputation is negatively impacted.
Before I forget, I wanted to cut in just to say congratulations that you're the first guest who said a crap shield between you and a slumlord. I
usually use more colorful language, but I don't know what you want this rated on iTunes.
Yeah, right.
So.
Welcome to the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. And now your hosts, Stephen White and Eric Worrell.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Rent Prep for Landlords. I'm your host, Eric Worrell. And this week we have a guest on the podcast, Jason Hall of DoorGrow. How you doing, Jason?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Eric.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So I actually connected with Jason and his team when we went down to the Florida NARPM annual conference last September, and then reconnected, via this digital world that we live in, and talking about having him on the podcast. And I thought he would be a great guest because you have a lot of experience working in real estate and specifically the property managers, and a lot of just past experience of speaking at events. And before I kind of just start butchering what it is you do, Jason, give us a kind of a 30,000 foot view of what your company does at DoorGrow.
Yeah, so the real simple version of what we do, basically I take property management companies that are struggling to grow, and we rehab their business so that they can, just like a landlord or a homeowner would rehab a property so that it could rent roll effectively. We'll rehab a property management company so that it can cash flow properly and it can grow.
So when you're working with a property management company, they usually come to you because they're either flatlining or decreasing in business, and then your company helps find them new leads, essentially, for people that are looking for property managers?
Well, yeah, sort of. So a lot of people will come to us looking, initially, they think they just want leads. And so one of the big myths or challenges in the property management space or in the industry is that most of them, their version of a lead, I'm doing air quotes for those listening, their version of a lead is word of mouth. That's what they're used to. And word of mouth has a really high close rate and a short sales cycle time, like it's easy to close them. And so one of my favorite things to do is help them understand the dramatic difference between cold leads and warm leads. And usually when you go to a marketing agency, the best thing they can deliver to you is cold leads. That's it. And cold leads, the difference between a cold lead and a warm lead is whether they know you, trust you, and like you. And the close rate on a cold lead is maybe like 1 out of 10, right? Maybe 10%. If they're, really amazing at sales, they might hit a 30% close rate or something. But cold leads generally are garbage, and it's their perception. So if they're used to warm leads and they go ask for cold leads, we used to do this. We would do advertising and SEO marketing stuff for them, and then they would pay-per-click, and we'd deliver leads to them, and they'd be like, "These are terrible," compared to what we're used to. Yeah. And so I think what's really important for people to understand is that about 70% of single family residential in the US is self-managed. And that means only about 30% are professionally managed. And if we contrast that to Australia, almost 80% of single family residential is professionally managed. Mm-hmm. So it's like the opposite.
I think I read before, is that because it's just so highly regulated in Australia?
Part of it's regulation, part of it's landlord insurance and some of these products that are now starting to hit America. But basically, there's the risk level is a little bit higher there. And I think also the perception here in the US as far as risk is probably not accurate. So I think a lot of landlords don't realize how much risk they're placing themselves in. Mm-hmm. And legislation really is it's coming, but it really has been the Wild West of, in the US. I mean, you've got in some markets, you don't even have to have any sort of license or anything in order to manage properties. There's a few states that you don't have to have even a real estate license in order to manage rental properties. You can just set up a sign and say that you do it. And these are some people's biggest investments ever. And then in most other areas of the US, the only qualifier to be able to legally manage properties is to get a broker's license, which really is completely irrelevant to property management. And so there's no clear indicator just by the fact that somebody can set up shop that they might do a decent job or legally be compliant or know what they're doing. And there's a lot of potential pitfalls. And so, so I think those are some of the differences. And I think what's really held the U.S. back in terms of growth, because Australia grew 25%, the property management industry grew 25% in 10 years. Like in a single decade. The U.S. property management's been around for a while, and it really hasn't changed much in the last 2 decades. As far as growth or awareness. And so the 2 big challenges in the industry here is first, perception. Is a big challenge. So if people are aware, there's kind of a negative perception. But the bigger challenge, the biggest challenge, even bigger than that, is just awareness. And very few homeowners or landlords are aware of property management, and the ones that are have a negative perception about property management.
Well, I would say that it's almost like negative all the way down, because I feel like sometimes your landlords, there's negative perceptions of them. I mean, if you start Googling the word landlord, I don't think your top 100 results are going to be pro landlord stories, and then landlords have a negative perception of property managers as just these people that are eating up their profits that aren't really delivering, on what they said they're going to deliver on. If for somebody listening, I mean, because you deal with so many property management companies, are there telltale signs of how you know that you're dealing with a professional company versus maybe someone like you mentioned that just decided one day to start managing properties and never really got any kind of training?
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point that even the landlords or the homeowners, they have a negative perception as well, and I think a lot of what's driven that perception is caused by people not doing a good job and not knowing how to do a good job. Really, managing property is death by 1,000 cuts. There's just so many potential points of failure. And I think landlords really are operating as a part-time property manager. And if they're really honest, they're operating as probably a pretty crappy part-time property manager. It's not a focus of theirs. It's not their full-time job. They don't have a lot of awareness. They're not studying landlord-tenant law. They fall into a lot of traps. They make a lot of mistakes. They're not responsive. And this is where a property manager as a partner can really help turn those rental properties into like that myth of having a turnkey investment. They can make that myth a reality. They can take that off their plate. Because I guarantee anyone listening to this, whether it's a landlord or a property manager, if you see an angry tenant showing up on your caller ID on your phone, you probably wish somebody else was dealing with that. And property management companies, they can take that weight off your plate, and they can also calm those fires down significantly because they can be far more responsive. And so I think with property managers, the way to tell the difference between good ones and bad ones, there's a lot of different factors. Like I said, there's death by 1,000 cuts, I think, in that industry. And so I think some of the things to pay attention to is if they are the cheapest ones in their market, and this is maybe what a lot of landlords, a big mistake, they'll go look for the cheapest guys. The cheapest companies are ones that work themselves and back themselves into a financial corner in which they can't effectively manage. They're not really doing a legit job. They are, they don't have enough revenue and cash flow to be able to hire enough staff to do a good job. They're not doing the inspections that they claim they might do. They're not, and they're the ones that get property management a bad name. And so I think a good property manager is confident enough in their service to charge a really, decent rate. And they're not trying to be the lowest price guys in their market. You really, in property management, get what you pay for in a lot of instances. And you'll see a lot of property managers get to about 50 or 60 units in single family and get stuck as a solopreneur. And then it's kind of the sand trap. I call it the first sand trap they fall into. And the only way to get out of that is usually at that point, they've got 50 or 60 units. They under management max. That's as many as they can handle all the maintenance requests on and leases on and dealing with the marketing of the properties, and they're just tapped out, and they've got too many doors in their portfolio that are too difficult to manage. The owners are difficult to deal with of the properties. And so what ends up happening is they're not setting really good expectations. They're not firing clients. And so if they have a portfolio of bad properties, they fall into this trap I call the cycle of suck. And the cycle of suck in property management with companies is they take on, and this is where the industry as a whole really sits, unfortunately, is they take on any owner instead of being careful about who they take on as a client. And if they take on any owner, some of these owners are going to want to feel safe and feel confidence, and they're not going to get it from these companies that are low price. And so they're going to try and micromanage these companies. And so they become really difficult clients to deal with, and they take a lot more time, which means their operational cost is higher. Not only that, but if they take on really bad owners, these are the ones that are basically slumlords. They're pushing back on everything. They want to do everything as cheap as possible. So then the property manager becomes kind of a crap shield for a slumlord, which is a really uncomfortable place to be as a company or as a business owner, because now your reputation is negatively impacted. Then, so the first step is they take on any owner or crappy owners. The next step is they have crappy property. So even if the property is newly remade, remodeled, it's amazing. If the owner's bad, the property is a bad property for them. And the reason being is the next step is they take on bad tenants, or they have bad tenants. And so every property manager and every landlord thinks they do great tenant screening, and they're going to say they focus on tenant screening. But you could do all the tenant screening in the world. You could get A-grade credit, perfect, tenants with lots of income. And if the property is bad or the owner is bad and pushing back on things, that tenant becomes a bad tenant for the property manager. Mm-hmm. And so if you have bad owners, bad properties, bad tenants, then you're going to have a bad reputation. You're going to have owners and tenants that are unhappy with you, and your reputation in your market is going to be bad. And this is where the whole industry generally sits in aggregate, is there's a lot of property managers that have taken on too many clients at too low of a price point, too many clients that are too difficult to manage, and their operational costs are 10 times higher than that of a property manager that's a little more cautious about who they deal with and who they take on. One bad door or one bad property in property management is easily 10 times the amount of work as a good door.
Yeah.
They need to be careful about what they allow into their portfolio, the areas that they're willing to manage, the types of clients they're willing to take on to avoid getting into that cycle of suck.
Before I forget, I wanted to cut in just to say congratulations that you're the first guest who said a crap shield between you and a slumlord. I
usually use more colorful language, but I don't know what you want this rated on iTunes.
Yeah, right. So. But it makes complete sense, everything that you're saying. It's kind of, and the other thing that you said that kind of stuck out to me was kind of the lie that a lot of people tell themselves. So I forget what the stat is, but it's something like 90% of drivers think they're above average driver.
Yeah.
So we all have this kind of ego. Yeah, it can. And probably the same can be said for landlords and property managers.
Absolutely.
I like to think the people that listen to this podcast or maybe listen to your podcast at the DoorGrow show are above average because they're taking the time to educate themselves and they're kind of separating themselves in that way. But yeah, when you're looking at the whole, just landlords and property managers in general, there is a spectrum that exists. And what you're describing is that people kind of start falling into pitfalls and traps where maybe they make one bad decision or they overextend themselves, whether they're a landlord or property manager. And then it just starts to kind of snowball into this worse situation where now that tenant that maybe was a good tenant seems like a bad tenant just because of the construct that you've built for them is making them behave that way, right?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with property management is if you do one thing poorly, it ends up being hundreds of people that you're doing things poorly with. So if you have a bad process for qualifying the types of owners you take on as a property manager, or as a landlord, you have a bad process for the types of properties you decide to bring into your own portfolio with a property management company, that could equal hundreds of bad situations. Mm-hmm. Hundreds of doors that they're overseeing and managing. I've had clients that had, I had one client that had 600 units under management and wasn't even profitable. And I asked him, how's that possible? And he said, well, our real estate company, which it's attached to, is doing $3 million a month in real estate. And so he had this cancerous tumor on the side of a really healthy real estate company. And that's why property management really, if you have one significant leak in the business, it gets multiplied by every single client that you have. Mm-hmm. And so that's why it's really critical. And the only way out of that a lot of times is for me to coach clients to fire some of their customers. They have to fire some of their clients and fire some of their doors. And because if they fire one bad door, it frees up room for them operationally to handle 10 good ones, maybe even more.
Yeah.
And so and become profitable because their operational costs can be really high.
Would you say for a landlord listening to this that's thought about hiring a property manager, if they talk to somebody and they're a staff of one and they say they have more than 60 doors, immediately it's kind of like starting to be a red flag. And if they say they've got 100 doors, it's kind of like, all right, how could this person possibly be doing this by themselves? Or
not necessarily. So the thing is usually when they get to that 50 or 60 door sand trap, if they can't break past that, what ends up happening is they're losing a door about as often as they're getting a door. And so I've seen people stay there for years, just not growing before they reach out to us. And then we've helped them like blow past that. But if you see a property manager that largely is a solopreneur and they're managing over 100 doors, then they have to, by default, you already know they've escaped the cycle of suck. They're in a place where they are really focused on the types of doors they want to manage. They're very careful about what they take into their portfolio. Either that or they're just in a really high rent, high end market where it naturally kind of avoids a lot of the challenges. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
But it is rare that you'll see that that somebody's managing over 100 doors and they're basically a solopreneur.
Okay.
Even husband and wife teams, a lot of times where you've almost got a free worker, you'll see them maybe get to maybe 80 or so single family homes under management, and they're kind of stressed out and tapping out. So, and they can't afford to hire anybody. That's the real challenge, is they can't afford that really big expense of hiring their first team member. And so the only way out of that is to fire some doors, double down, get some good doors on, and then they can start to break past that. But the thing to realize is that there's 70% available potential market share. I mean, there's 70% that are self-managing. And so for property managers, if they're focused on the big challenge that causes this, another big challenge is they're spending a lot of their discretionary revenue or income in their business towards marketing, to try and grow their business, to trying to get out of this problem. And they're spending it on stuff that isn't working. And so they're doing SEO and they're doing pay-per-click and they're doing content marketing and they're doing social media marketing. Meanwhile, there's this huge awareness problem. So people aren't even aware of property management. So spending a bunch of money to say we're the best property manager in Tucson doesn't really make a big difference if everybody's going, what the hell's that? You know? So, and then the next challenge is perception. And so if there's a real negative perception, then people also aren't like looking for property managers. And so, but there's 70% available market share. So what we do is we shift a lot of our clients' attention towards going after that blue ocean instead of fighting where every property management company is over the coldest, worst leads that come through Google. And that arena is bloody. I mean, search volume for property management as a keyword, according to Google Trends, has been on a decline since 2011. The summer of 2011. It's been going down. It hasn't really increased since 2004 when Google started tracking data. But competition in the property management space for keywords and for SEO and pay-per-click has gone through the roof because of marketing agencies. And so all these marketers and web design companies, they're all pushing everybody towards SEO. And I don't know if listeners won't be able to see my shirt here, but that's why I made the shirt to say SEO won't save you. And it's got a little life preserver with a hand reaching up out of the water, somebody drowning. Because all these property managers think that SEO is their savior and they're trying to do SEO and manipulate Google. And they just think, if I could just have that top spot in Google. And that's the equivalent of going to Vegas trying to make a fortune on the slot machines. Yep. It just isn't, it's a gamble. And there's going to be one major winner. And it's usually going to be Goliath. And David's going to get his butt kicked any day of the week if he tries to do the same things and use the same weapons that the biggest companies are using. Yeah. And so they need to fight back. And it's real simple. They just need to go out into that blue ocean and start connecting with investors that have real challenges long before they're looking for a property manager and start creating relationships.
Yeah. So maybe you don't have to give away the secret sauce, but as far as DoorGrow goes, so you're not helping people really just say, hey, we're property managers, we can be your property management. Like, are you finding investors earlier in the process, or how are you connecting to those investors that you were just talking about?
Well, I mean, we're really transparent. Like before we even take on a client, because we don't want to fall into the cycle of suck either, right?
Mhm.
So we actually have people watch an hour and like 45-minute training that teaches them some of our principles and concepts and then showcases our whole process. And our goal is that after that, they're either really excited and want to work with us and they know exactly what they're getting themselves into, or they think, well, I could probably do it myself. And that helps them, like helps us avoid the people that are the most difficult to work with.
Mm-hmm.
That we really wouldn't be able to help because they would think they know better throughout the whole process anyway. So,
yeah.
So basically our process in a nutshell is we'll take a property management company and our goal is to identify all the major constraints or leaks that exist inside of their sales pipeline, all the way from awareness at the very beginning, all the way through to closing a deal and getting a contract. And in the sales process or sales cycle. And so if we've identified what we feel are like maybe the 5 or 6 most significant leaks that exist there, and if we can clean those up, what ends up happening is it's a lot easier to build trust, create awareness, and grow their business. And then once we get that leak shored up throughout this hose, so to speak, so that water's flowing through it, then instead of turning on the spigot of marketing, which they could do, we coach our clients to shift towards prospecting methods like real estate investor groups, foreclosure auctions, these sort of situations in which they can connect with investors long before they're searching on Google. Mm-hmm. And create relationships and be a resource for them. Yeah. And that is a situation in which they're able to do one-to-many sales instead of hoping for a one-to-one sales opportunity that's really cold.
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you're saying because before we got on the call, we were saying that we both have marketing backgrounds. And I used to work with a roofing company and we did pay-per-click advertising with them. And you can record the calls and listen to the calls afterwards to see how they're doing. It was through Google Ads. So this company was spending like tons of money on Google Ads. And then the person, she was very sweet. I knew she was. I met her in the office. Who was answering those calls would get, somebody saying like, "Hi, I'm looking for a roof quote," and she'd go, "Okay, hold on 1 second," and then put somebody on hold for like 3 minutes. And I'm sitting there listening to this recorded call, like, "Oh my gosh, this is such a waste of money." So what you're describing is the process all the way through of somebody. It's not just about more leads; it's about how do you nurture a lead, how do you bring them through, how do you close those leaks that you're talking about in the funnel and getting somebody at the other end of wanting to trust you and do business with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sales happens at the speed of trust. Mm-hmm. That's it. And so if you can create more trust. So if the website, for example, is one of the major leaks that we tackle with clients, we do website design. And if the website is focused on trying to manipulate Google, instead of trying to build trust and create trust, and doesn't have things like social proof and lead capture and trust symbols and hero photos, and it doesn't feel transparent and it's not creating and building a relationship, and it's just trying to manipulate the search results, then it's not going to convert as well and it's not going to capture as much business.
Yeah. So I have a question. We were talking about this before we got onto the call, that sometimes you find people that are really good at managing properties. They're managing their own properties. So maybe they've got 5, 10, 20 or whatever. And maybe they're the resource to their friends who are always running into issues and they're always asking them what they should be doing. You said that sometimes you'll counsel people on why they should start their own property management company because they're good at it and there's potential for them to make a full-time career out of that. How does that relationship usually go? Or what do you tell those people that might be thinking about that or thinking that they may have a future in property management?
Yeah. So I get kind of excited about those people. So if they are managing a certain number of units and they're doing a good job and they care about the tenants and they actually enjoy doing the management side of things, I think that there's a lot of investors out there. Well, they're probably weird. I mean, that's a little bit different that they might enjoy doing that. But those people can easily turn that into a business. And if they love real estate investing, being a property manager gives you dibs on all the best real estate investments. You have access to a constant influx of potential properties. These owners are going to sell sometimes. Sometimes people are reaching out because they're accidental investors. They want to offload this door or this property in the next year. And so you have this constant access to potential deals and investments. And so as an investor, it's a gold mine. But if you enjoy managing properties, not only can you do that for your own properties, but you can do it for other people. And it's a business that can be systemized. It's systemizable. It's a business that creates residual income. It can be built over time. And so you'll see a lot of real estate agents that just get tired of the chase and the hunt and the hustle and closing the next deal, wanting to finally build something that's stable and has residual income. And if they do it right, and if they do a good job, they can build a business that can grow pretty quickly, and it can be very profitable. And so there's a lot of tools and resources available, like Rent Prep and like other vendors and things. There's a lot of great systems and tools that are available when you have scale.
Yeah.
And these property managers have access to that the average landlord just doesn't.
Well, I think one of the things you mentioned too is that can a system be built around it? And from talking to property managers over the years, the ones that are really fine-tuned, they've built their systems to the point where they're just they're not in the weeds at all. They're not handling any calls. They're not handling any issues. They've got a team that's running all their support for them. And I know Brad Larson comes to mind. He's been a guest in the podcast where, the guy, he likes to golf. He's out on the golf course a decent amount because he's built that system and he has an awesome business to support, his dreams and what he wants to do. So I think sometimes when people think of becoming a property manager, it's like, why would you want to do all of the worst aspects of real estate investing? Just dealing with the people and the issues, but you can start there and learn how to grow that business and use somebody like yourself, DoorGrow, to teach you how to do that and really have a business that works well for you that's very scalable.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that we don't teach clients is how to manage properties. And so if somebody knows how to do that, they know how to do that well, they understand landlord tenant law, they figured this stuff out, they can manage, we can help them figure out how to win, which is probably the biggest challenge that exists in the industry, is figuring out how to win in property management. There's lots of really great property managers out there. They really do mean well, and they want to do a good job. But if they're spending the bulk of their marketing dollars or money towards marketing, and it's not working and getting them a return, and they're not growing, and they don't have growth, the first thing to go out the window when you're lacking cash flow is customer service. And this is what perpetuates this bad perception of property managers in the industry, is because they're trying to do what everybody says should be working, and it's not. And so our mission at DoorGrow is to shift people away from just focusing on this vitamin pill, so to speak, this supplement of SEO and pay-per-click, and getting them doing the basics like eating food and drinking water if they're trying to grow and build their business, And so we want to focus, and I'm speaking metaphorically here, but we want to get them to focus on that blue ocean, get them focused on the that 70% available potential market share in which there's less competition, in which they can grow faster, they can build real relationships. And if we help the best property managers win, I believe that good property management can change the world. It can have a massive impact. If you think of all the renters out there and all the rental properties, there are thousands and thousands of families impacted by the decisions that are being made by the landlord or by the property manager. And if managing properties is done well, it can have a huge ripple effect, which affects the nation economically, which affects families, which affects people's pressure and noise in life. And it also has a big impact on the families of the homeowners if it's done well and managed well, and their families and their finances. And so that gets me excited. There's a really big ripple effect that we can have by having hundreds of property management companies that are doing it well and succeeding.
Yeah, I love that. I couldn't agree with you more. I've talked about that before on the podcast, where it's just the impact that even one property manager can have on a community is substantial. So if they're doing it right and they're growing, both of those are a recipe for a better community that people can live in. So Jason, to close out the podcast here, what's the best way for people to reach out to you, get connected with your company? Yeah,
so the easiest way to get connected with us is just to go to doorgrow.com. You can find DoorGrow just about everywhere. And those that are seriously considering, are really serious about starting a property management business, that are really good at managing properties and understand landlord tenant law and serious about this stuff, we would love to invite them to join our community of property management business owners called the DoorGrow Club. They can go to doorgrowclub.com, which is kind of the community for our podcast. And they're also welcome to check out my podcast at doorgrowshow.com. So the DoorGrow Show, you can find it on YouTube. You can find it on iTunes. And so they can check out our podcast as well. And then we also do an annual conference called DoorGrow Live. So, so DoorGrow's all over the place.
DoorGrow Live, is that St. Louis? I'm trying to remember.
We did a conference our first inaugural event was in St. Louis. We had about 150 property management entrepreneurs there. We brought in some awesome speakers like Mike Michalowicz, who wrote Profit First and The Pumpkin Plan. And we had Alex Sharfin, who's an awesome, phenomenal $1 million plus business coach. And then we brought in 3 Australians that were experts in property management, and we brought in a gentleman who was just an amazing person at building sales teams, and so we had a phenomenal conference, and we're looking at doing it again this year, and it's going to be in November at the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs.
Okay, very cool. All right, Jason. Well, thank you for your insights and your time being on the podcast today. And guys, check out those resources. If you're thinking about starting a property management company, or you just want to start doing things right from a lead generation standpoint and trying to grow your property management company from within, check out DoorGrow. And thanks so much for being on the podcast today, Jason.
Eric, I really appreciate you having me. Thanks.
Take care.